Hi, everyone. Hi, fellow panelists and people watching. Welcome. Today we are having this webinar with the objective to educate businesses on the complexities of the new DPDP draft rules. And what we want to cover here is how it is clarifying some of the act and hopefully provide some sort of actionable guidance towards a compliance roadmap for organizations. We have today with us Supratim. Supratim Chakravarti is partner at Khaitan Co, co-leads the firm's data privacy and cybersecurity practice. He's a recognized expert in technology laws. He has been advising on data privacy, intermediary liability, and cybersecurity, and has earned his accolades like the Lexology Client Choice Award and ET's 40 under 40, and also very actively involved in the in what we see today as the privacy laws in the country as well. We have with us Deepti. Deepti Lakshmeshwar is a chartered accountant by profession with more than 20 years of work experience in IT and banking domain. She has been with Axis for over 11 years now. Deepti's core expertise includes SOX and IFC compliance, data quality and governance. And she led the bank's DQ team for 4 years before taking over as the DPO for the organization. Welcome, Deepti.
Thank you so much, Ashok.
Debashri Mukherjee is a director at PwC, leads a data privacy regulatory practice, and represents India in the global data privacy network. With over 15 years of experience, she has delivered 1,000+ sessions on GDPR, US privacy laws, and India's privacy frameworks, including DPDPA. Welcome, Debashri.
Thanks.
Dr. Yusuf Hashmi is a renowned cybersecurity expert with extensive experience in designing and implementing cutting-edge strategies to safeguard organizations against evolving digital threats. With a career spanning over 2 decades, he has consistently demonstrated exceptional leadership in aligning cybersecurity initiatives with business objectives to deliver measurable outcomes. Welcome, Yusuf.
Thank you so much.
So what we'll do today is have about 4 sections. One is around just an introduction. We'll sort of look at what these rules mean, and we'll sort of unpack that a little bit. Then the third section will kind of cover how do you design a compliance plan for an organization, and I think this will be kind of interesting around actually the implementation elements of it. Then kind of cover my favorite topic, because we are a tech partner and a compliance partner. We'll evaluate how choosing a tech partner for compliance might work as well. Oh, sorry, I think I missed Sindhu. Sorry, Sindhu. We have Sindhu as well here. I don't know how I missed that. Sindhu is the managing director of Protiviti India, and she leads West Region practice with a dedicated focus on technology audit and data privacy. She has over 25 years of experience, and she led and assisted clients across India and international markets in cybersecurity and data privacy audit. Again, apologies, Sindhu. I don't know why I missed that.
Absolutely fine. Thank you so much.
So, as we all know, the draft rules are out in the sense, and now there's a lot of talk around how these get implemented, as well as now the formal rules should come out hopefully after the consultation soon enough. Hopefully not as late as it took for the last time around. And we kind of joked around in IDfy, and we have a lot of content around this as well, around Tariq pe Tariq, as every law, as part of that joke around when is this rules going to come, and finally it's here. So what I find in specifically the law, the act as well as the rules is it is a principles-based law, right? And as you can see, the rules are not specific, like it's not going to go to the nth level of detail to kind of say exactly this is what significant data fiduciary means, or this is what exactly child to parent relationship is going to be. A lot of that is left to somewhat of it is left to certain level of interpretation, but there is a lot of clarity as well. And so that's sort of where we'll start from, and maybe to unpack the rules. Supratim, whatever, since you have been very closely working with the powers that be, want to just kind of summarize the draft rules a little bit for us, unpack that.
Yeah, right. So I think a lot to talk about, Ashok. You and I have spoken at length in the past that people are expecting some kind of a miracle that, every single question, every granular detail would be out there. The answer is no. Like you correctly mentioned, Ashok, I think it's a principles-based and a rules-based approach, somewhere middle of the road, I would say. And therefore, what you observe is certain aspects have been delineated, okay? And some others have been left for the industry to really lap up responsibly and see what will be the approach that you should take when you put yourself in the shoes of a data principal, okay, how you would like it to be. So if I have to like bucketize it, I think one is of course some operational clarity, how notice should be, reasonable security measures, whilst people were expecting some kind of a standard to be mentioned, like ISO, etc. That has not happened, but some thumb rules have been provided. Data principal related rights, a data breach notification, etc. The second one is some demystification or further elaboration on certain concepts like, say, consent manager. Okay. And some are really a build on upon what was already there. For example, significant data fiduciaries, what additionally they are required to do. I think, and of course, there are other aspects in relation to government, etc. Right now, we are focusing on what impacts businesses. And my quick take would be those. As we go along, maybe we can unpack each and every item there. But in a nutshell, that's where I'll stop.
Deepti, like Supratim mentioned, a lot of this is principle based and things like that. So from a BFSI sector perspective, what is your immediate thoughts around the sectoral sort of way of looking at this problem, right? As how do you think the BFSI sector should be thinking about the rules and the privacy and this Privacy Act?
So Ashok, I'll just take a step back and, honestly, I would really want to talk as a customer first. I mean, this particular enactment, of this, law coming into play, it really makes me feel good as a customer. For the longest time, whatever service or product one wanted to avail, and you had no option but to give into all of the details that these platforms asked us for, these entities asked us for, because you just wanted to get those services. And what worried me as the customer is what happens to my data after this? Where is it? Whom is it being shared with? I have long, stopped using that facility or, availing that service or the subscription. And yet my data is out there. As a customer, number one, it makes me feel very empowered now to know that, there is someone watching out for me. In the same breath, while I talk about a customer, who is a parent as well, so you talk about child's data, now coming back, as a DPO, or maybe, belonging to the other side, who's supposed to be the more responsible one. Honestly, I once again look at it as a very welcome move, because when I talk about it at Axis Bank, customer centricity and transparency being, two of our very core values. I think it just helps me connect better with my customer, give them better service, because today they'll feel more heard. Their confidence in me increases furthermore. And therefore, obviously, there will be some amount of pain that we will have to go through to, raise our standards in probably, implementing the consent tool, etc. But very welcome move, especially since it just helps me get my customers' confidence and trust much better. So, yeah.
Cool. We kept as IDfy, when we started, at least when I first started on this path, one of it came from extreme pain as a customer, right? Like it's, my data is everywhere, and I get all these calls from random people, and my data is like kind of sold to God knows scamsters also these days. So a lot of our my view was actually looking at it from a customer's perspective initially. And then it somehow we created a product on trying to look at this as a governance tool, and I want to differentiate between concerned manager and governance as two separate problems. The manager is what the act talks about, but governance, internal governance, is a pain for any organization, because how do you manage a process? Because the concerned manager is an external tool looking at it from a principal's perspective, but internally as organizations, how do you then like sort of build internal governance? And that's sort of what IDfy sort of looked at as well. On and you know, a lot of what we talk about is, as you build better and better governance, the amount of trust that you kind of the customer has on you actually increases revenue for an organization. We've seen that in GDPR world. The banks which actually implemented this, the companies which actually implemented it actually grew faster than the companies which didn't. Right, and that's kind of based on the aspects of trust as well.
True.
Right. Yusuf, on a specific on considering Jubilant, and you guys obviously across, like it's coming from a logistics, it has a logistics side, it has a customer side as well. How are you thinking about this specifically on Jubilant at one end, and considering the experience across segments, what are your immediate thoughts on how this rule applies into other sectors like pharma, retail, or construction?
I think it's a pertinent question and pretty serious question, because privacy is something is not by culture in India so far, right? So, and the management itself need to understand first and what is needed actually to be fully compliant to privacy norms. So when you have diversified businesses in a group, I think then it becomes more challenging, because different business lines, verticals, pharma, chemical, agri, and in infrastructure. So when you understand these industries, they are not ready for privacy yet, because the kind of data that gets processed. First of all, there's a sheer lack of understanding of the data sets, where the data lies. Even the understanding of structured and unstructured data, still people are trying to explain what is structured, what is unstructured. And when it comes to reality, it becomes more challenging. So we see it now as a requirement from the government, from the various requirement principle perspective. Since I've happened to be known to the other global frameworks like GDPR, PIPEDA, Quebec laws. So this law is not that you can say unique, or many of the controls are very much similar to what the other regulations have in place, except the consent management piece, which is now here in this law. It has to be managed by a third party provider, right? Rest all compliances, you have to develop that capability in-house or adopt a platform for consent management. I think inventory of the data is so very crucial in this overall program. I think we have to start doing now because it's not a 1 or 2 or 3 months job, right? You need to scan through and understand where your data is lying. Practically, that would be the biggest challenge to identify and then take the next steps towards complying to the various requirements that we have. I think the visibility of the data plays a very critical role now, since this law has already been passed and the rules are out. We expect certain clarity of understanding of where the data is going to be stored, processed, transferred to a different region altogether. I think it will bring in some kind of clarity, but all at the outset, it is very clear what is needed for the organization to actually comply with.
So Pratim, I'm going to ask you, I think Yusuf mentioned that it is very similar to GDPR. I'm going to ask you a question which kind of, hopefully you give a more clarity on how it is different from GDPR. Obviously, there are a lot of similarities, but there are some nuanced differences between GDPR and obviously the DPDP Act. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I think
I see we want disagreements in this panel, right? Otherwise, it doesn't sound.
no, there are. See, of course, every jurisdiction will create some kind of a nuanced approach, and some differences will be there. The general principles kind of could remain the same. But just to give simple examples, say age of child is 18 years. Under GDPR, it is 16 years. It can go below up to 13 years, depending on the member state. What you're observing right now in relation to verifiable parental consent, let's see how this evolves. But definitely, you'll have to have a different mechanism for this. When consent managers come into play, you'll have to think differently. And the examples are numerous. Data breach reporting, we might talk about it as we speak more, but there is no risk-based, harm-based aspect which has been brought in. So it's like a wide-ranging definition, and anything and everything will require you to have that three-pronged approach to reporting. We'll talk about those. But yes, there are distinctions. So I think we'll have to still work towards it to see that the delta is covered and we are specifically compliant with the Indian law as well.
On specifically breach reporting, since you brought it up, and that was literally my next question. And we talked about the three-pronged thing that the rules talk about, obviously reporting to the principal and then reporting to the DPB. And then there's obviously historically they've been reported, you have to report to certain as well. Now, how is that going to, like, what are your thoughts around the differences between GDPR there specifically, as well as how should companies think about that?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. GDPR, there are a lot of differences again, but a fundamental difference is what I just told, the risk-based approach or a harm-based approach, which would have been much better when you talk about reporting to the regulator, to the individuals, etc. Right? What is there in the rules today? It's I would say, three-pronged approach, like I was mentioning. One is you will have to go to the data protection board immediately and give some basic information. Again, within 72 hours or such longer period as is allowed by the data protection board, you'll have to go to them and give far more detailed information. And also you have to go to the impacted users, individuals, and tell them about the incident and maybe what they can do, what you have done, etc. Interestingly, Ashok, I would request all listeners here to take note of this. When you see the 72-hour breach reporting list of things to be told to the data protection board, one of the line item is the information that you have already sent out to the individuals. Now that effectively means that within 72 hours, you have also reported to the individuals. We all know, especially people who are working in this space know that in 72 hours, probably you will know nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. And now you have a situation where you'll have to go within 6 hours to the cert in, because if I'm sure it will be a cyber incident as well. And there the definition is fairly wide. Every incident kind of becomes a cyber incident reportable. Then you'll have to immediately go to the data protection board. Within 72 hours, you'll again go to the board with more information and you'll have to report to individual. Also, if there is a sector regulator involved, say a Reserve Bank of India, SEBI, CERSAI, whoever, you'll have to also go and report to them. And these days, my experience, Ashok, is that the sector regulators have become more aggressive than your sector neutral regulators. So probably, organizations will have to work a lot harder. They'll have to have a playbook of sorts, pre-prepared, so that they know who does what in a bad day. And the timelines are very clear. There should also be, I think, a single source of truth from where you pluck and keep reporting to the relevant regulators in the way they want.
Gosh, that's gonna be hard, right? Like, and Sindhu and Debashri, since you guys come from a consulting world and you see this on a regular basis, that and I can only imagine these questions must be coming up to you guys all the time. What are your thoughts on specifically around how do you think about design of processes and technology, as well as people and training, because this is not going to be solved by a platform alone, right? This is a far wider remit. So maybe Debashri, you can comment on it first, and we'll move, or vice versa, whoever
Sure,
wants to
sure,
start.
absolutely. So yes, as you rightly said, Ashok, it is an amalgamation of technology, process, trainings, and awareness. At the grassroots root level, it is very important to first make the organizations understand what are the do's and don'ts that the data principals would have, so that they can go ahead and impart trainings. When it comes to technology, there are a lot of things that they need to do today to get compliant, but there are a lot of things that are still not addressed. For example, a software algorithm. Now, organizations are struggling with what would constitute software. Is there a definition? Do we fall back on general laws, etc.? And those are the things that are still unaddressed, and they would want to do. But everything has to go very hand in hand. So we typically have to have the legal expertise, the tech expertise. We will have training expertise, and everything amalgamated into a bucket and served before the organizations.
And Sindhu, what are what are you hearing from some of your customers? What is the biggest, like, let me ask a question, which is maybe like, what are they worried about the most? And then I have another question which subsequent to that, but let's start. What are they worried about most, and what is the thing, one question being asked?
I think one of the questions many of my customers have reached, how am I going to do this? There are so many gray areas in the rules. In terms of parental consent, in terms of significant data fiduciary, while there is a clarity on social media, e-commerce website, am I a significant data fiduciary? Like telecom industry, they have crores of users, right?
Yeah.
Do I qualify to be a significant data fiduciary? Then in terms of consent management, how do I manage this? Okay.
Yeah.
So what are the framework that needs to be adopted? Because the law at this point of time says that there's a discretion provided to the data principal that either they could go through the data fiduciary or through a consent manager to adopt the consent management framework. So which means there's a redundancy of control requirement both at the data fiduciary level as well as the consent management. So these are the burning questions that are coming up from my customers in terms of how do we address these. So yeah, a lot of noise.
I think just to add on to that, I think what the organizations are worried about is more on how will we stop data breach, how will we zero it down. But we also need to understand that the intention of the government is not to zero down the data breach. It cannot be a situation where it would go to a zero down situation. All they want to see is how have you brought up your privacy framework in your organization, whether you're ready to handle a data breach or not. I think a lot of questions around this data breach is also something that the organizations are getting worried.
Yeah, I think one of the recently I heard about data, heard a statistic around data breaches specifically, right? 80% of the data breach is some error, human error, and not really a attack. It's probably an Excel sheet somewhere which is getting shared freely or and things like that, right? And that's where the problem really starts, right? Because you have your, wherever it is a system, it's still you can kind of solve that problem by putting tech around it. But wherever it is moves from what I would call digital to physical, let's say in a bank, it goes to a delivery partner who now has an Excel sheet of 50 customers that he needs to print a ID card and send it to. That Excel sheet goes to a printer, and then that printer has leaked it. Now, how are you connecting the dots between these different players to kind of say that, okay, there is a mitigation possible, right? Like, because how are you going to provide a remediation strategy on a digital to physical to multiple sub-processor level? This is something which kind of is in my head. That's where I'm thinking is, and how will the government look at that? Will they say, hey, you have taken the necessary steps to control as much as possible, so we will, it is okay, breaches can happen, or are they going to be a lot more stricter? I don't know the answer to that, and if any of you want to comment.
No, maybe Ashok, I can just sort of maybe chime in there. If you observe, and that's the fear factor which has been built in, 250 crore rupees of fine,
Correct.
right? Now, that does not mean everything that happens, you have to pay 250 crore rupees fine.
Correct.
There is a waterfall, or there's a list of things which are written before that, which will be considered before while determining that penalty amount. And there are things like repetitiveness of the breach. What did you do to address the situation? What kind of data was breached? Things like those.
Correct.
So therefore, I think we will have to, like Debashri was correctly mentioning, demonstrating compliance will become a very big thing. Did I go up to 80, 85, 90? Versus I didn't do anything because I was thinking that there'll be further delineations, etc. That will not help.
Correct. Sindhu, a question to you. Considering global, and you're as Protiviti, you're looking at it as a global problem. What synergies do you see between, like, between among stakeholders like IT, GRC, privacy, legal, tech, how do you build a sustainable, self-sustaining privacy program? Because India, we are just coming to it now, and maybe some of our fiduciaries like the banks might be slightly ahead, but let's be very honest, we are all behind, right? On a good privacy posture or a good enough privacy program. So how do you think about this when you think about it from a global perspective, and how should we be borrowing some of those concepts?
Yeah, I think that's one of the foremost question. Whose responsibility is the DPDPA? Is it only legal's responsibility? Is it only IT team's responsibility? So rightly said, there has to be a seamless integration and synergies between these departments. First of all, there needs to be a shared responsibility framework, which clearly articulates the roles and responsibilities across these departments. For example, IT and technology should adopt a privacy by design approach. Our privacy team is responsible for establishing the protection framework, define the policies and procedures, institute the compliance roadmap. Our legal team needs to look at all the existing agreements to ensure the Data Protection Act is factored into, and probably have new templates rolled out for business consumption. GRC team is the driver for ensuring compliance is met. They have to conduct regular audits, monitor the risk parameters, enforce policies. And in fact, the GRC team will be able to see the emerging patterns and non-compliances, which can feed back to the leadership team to bring in further enhancement on the framework towards data protection. There needs to be absolute collaboration among all the departments when it comes to addressing the compliance need. And the most important thing is it is not a singular responsibility, it's a collective responsibility. Therefore, there needs to be a cultural shift in the organization when it comes to adopting a data protection framework. To begin with, you need to have training and awareness conducted for all the roles existing in the organization, so they understand how do they contribute towards compliance and what are their roles that they need to be aware of, what are the things that they need to be mindful of when they're doing their day-to-day business, right? And most importantly, some of the burning concerns is how do I manage data classification? How do I deal with data breaches? How do I deal with consent management? There are many solutions available in the market, and they should definitely look forward to implementing some of the technology-led solution to ensure compliance in data discovery, data compliance, data breach related processes. And then, of course, a continuous improvement program needs to be incorporated as part of the GRC framework. So this is what globally across industries people do in order to ensure they are compliant.
It's interesting, right? Because all of a sudden, earlier the CISO's responsibility was largely audit.
Yeah.
Suddenly, this is the DPO and the CISO. Now this is like a huge responsibility because
Yes.
it's no longer, oh yeah, let's do an audit, a VAPT test once in a quarter and figure out if there are holes, and then we'll do a remediation.
Yeah.
It's actually literally about looking at it as at every level, right? So if I were to, like, at least at IDfy, the way we think about it also is, yeah, we have to bring the thoughts around privacy up ahead when we are designing the product. It cannot be an afterthought. It contracting, for example, cannot be an afterthought that somebody is just reviewing at the end of the year. But it's like, are you designing your contracts properly? So it's honestly, the role elevates itself, and obviously salaries will go up, right? And then on this role,
Ashok,
interesting.
if I may come in, whilst we are discussing about the rules which are yet to take effect, interestingly, there are certain breaches which have happened in the recent past, and the sector regulator has become very proactive. And I'm not naming the regulator or the kind of industry, but the questions asked are as follows. Please submit a copy of the contract that you have with this service provider.
Wow.
Question number 2, which are the provisions in relation to data privacy and protection? Please highlight them. Question number 3, did you ever check that this particular service provider actually had the ability to implement the data privacy protection related provisions that you have incorporated? Question number 4, did you ever ask them to delete any data? If yes, submit proof.
Wow. So people are thinking that you have to wait for the rules to be out, but no, the government is not waiting. Like if I were to look at that Meta, the fine on Meta, the Competition Commission actually referenced the DPDP Act. So for anybody thinking that you can wait for
Ashok, many regulators right now, we have seen many notices by now are writing like this. You know that you have obligations under sector neutral and sector specific law, including, and they've quoted maybe PMLA, etc., etc. And they've said also you are aware about the upcoming DPDP Act.
Correct.
So no one is, I think no regulator here now is shying off from writing this in notices.
Correct. It's you know, at some level good and at some level scary as hell, right? Because you with our with whatever we have to do to get compliant. Yusuf, now question to you: what challenges do you think? Like, let's go a little bit specific around, like, what challenges do you think we are going to look at in managing sensitive data? And sensitive data, let me also clarify that the Act specifically talks about PII data, but unlike GDPR, where sensitive data is given a special provision, the Act doesn't really talk about it in that level of specificity. For health records or like, for example, whether marital status and things like that. What are your thoughts on how you know how we should be thinking around this kind of stuff and the consent obligations that you might have?
I think government majorly focused on the privacy aspect of data, right? And sensitive data we have been actually protecting so far under various regulations. What is important to understand is that understanding the data set, of course, it is the most important aspect of where your data is lying, right? How do you classify your data, right? And when it comes to privacy itself, because this is something over and above what you're already doing to protect your data, right? You're already running your DLP systems. You're already classifying your data, right, as public, private, confidential.
Yusuf, can I request on DLP, just like, you know, I know what it is, but for the audience, maybe you want to just go one level deeper. Like a lot of my customers, they don't have DLP or
so it's become more challenging because it's just not about privacy or identifying your private or personal data. It's also about protecting your data going out of the organization with unauthorized access, which is majorly aligned to the insider threats, right? And we know that as a CISOs, we handle these incidents every day in, day out, where an employee transfer a lot of data before resigning, sending over to a cloud drive or sending it to a personal email ID. And many cases it happens when in a field force kind of environment, where the staff doesn't have access to their managed devices. So they usually transfer data to their personal email ID, go to the cyber cafe and then process and then transfer back to their original email ID. So DLP, data classification, discovery, and your portfolio of the data, right? Is so very important, and tagging. I think it's just not from technology perspective. There are many technologies you have to deploy in order to get the holistic view of your privacy environment. So it's just not about actually placing a privacy automation platform or consent management. So there's a lot of things that need to be in place in order to have a holistic view of your privacy regime, right? And you have to include privacy enhancing techniques, right? You have to start thinking of anonymizing and pseudonymizing your privacy data, which you have not been doing so far, right? You have to introduce homomorphic encryption. So you have to still process, identify the data which is encrypted. How do you know that what's happening, what the kind of data has been? So the privacy enhancing techniques is something play a very major role. And of course, as we understood, it's not just technology, it's the way how you use the technology for this purpose is the most important thing, because there are new things and you might end up doing so many things but not being able to achieve your the real outcome. So you have to be very very pragmatic and very, you can say, a slow approach has to be taken, because government has given a lot of time. So, uh, and it doesn't mean that we just wait for something to happen in a year or so.
Yeah.
You have to do it now, because you have to start somewhere. If you are not there, you have to start somewhere and start working towards this entire journey. So it's not a one-day journey that it will take, because GDPR itself took around 2 years for
Yeah.
the organization to comply with. I think it, for in an organization, in an environment and the culture of Indian context, it may take more time actually to
Yeah.
have this kind of uh, ecosystem being in place. So it's a both combination of technology, process, strategy, right, and compliance, of course. I think, uh, and when you have a global organization who are already compliant to other frameworks, then it's become a bit easier for them, because it's this addition and augmentation of their existing regulatory environment. But organizations which are new, which means that they are pure play Indian based organization, they have to, of course, do a lot of work, especially when they are processing data. And of course, it's not straightforward. It's pretty
Yeah.
complex. What we think they appear to be very easier understanding those rules, but when it comes to practically application or implementation, you would really experience tremendous amount of challenges, because that's what, when GDPR came into the picture, it took quite a bit of time in order to actually comply with the basic requirement. So, and of course, it was much easier in that ecosystem because they are already privacy kind of focus regions.
Yeah.
India is going to be different for sure.
Yeah. I think there's another big problem, right? For a lot of us as Indians, we ourselves don't respect our own data that much.
Yes.
So I keep joking around saying that, if somebody pays somebody 20 rupees, they'll probably give them their whole kundli, right? And
Yeah.
in that kind of framework,
Yes.
and that kind of culture, and that culture not only is at the individual level, it's at the corporate level as well. We don't realize it because we think that, oh, we put these processes in place, we put these technology in place, but the people are still Indian. They're still thinking like that. So they're like, hey,
No.
एक
Yeah.
WhatsApp में भेज दिया message तो क्या ही फर्क पड़ता है WhatsApp में
See, I
accept.
think you're right. I think the importance of data will really trigger now.
Yeah.
Which we have been ignoring, right?
Correct.
We don't usually pay any attention to the data which is lying in a machine or a laptop. We are
Correct.
focused mainly on the enterprise databases.
Correct.
Or the data lying on the file servers.
Correct.
Now that things will definitely change. So you can't actually survive now. You have to have visibility across your environment, whether that data is lying in a hard drive or in a cloud drive or an S3 bucket. I think that
Yeah.
the importance of data will play a very, very
Yeah.
major role in the next few years.
Yeah. So we'll go to the final section. I think this was great around obviously scaring the crap out of people around how difficult this is going to be. But let's go to how do we get there? And it's not. I personally I don't think it's impossible to start getting compliant and getting compliant now. And for the audience as well as for people in the panel who are not using us yet, we can solve that problem for you. But jokes aside, let's look at evaluating a tech partner for compliance. Deepti, questions to you. What role do platforms play in helping data fiduciaries achieve compliance? Specifically around scaling consent management. And before I won't say consent management, let me clarify that's consent governance. And let's separate those two, right? Even when a consent manager is involved, the notice creation is still the fiduciary's responsibility. The consent manager does not create the notice, right? He's only presenting the notice to the customer. When a breach happens, the consent manager is not involved. Consent manager is only informing the principle that the breach has happened. So let's look at it from a consent governance standpoint and not a management. And that's the reason I want to make a very clear differentiation between those two terms, because there's a lot of confusion around what is a consent manager's responsibility and what is a consent governance responsibility. What should the fiduciary do? Oh, people think that, consent manager will solve everything for us. That's not going to happen. And that's the question to you.
So as you rightly mentioned, a tech partner is only an enabler, Yeah, the wish list, if you have to ask me, is a long one. So when
Oh
it comes
no.
to say consent management, and you talk about having consent management for prospective journeys, it sounds relatively simpler and doable. But when you have a legacy data, when you have things that have to be retrospectively done, because the act nowhere differentiates saying that this moment forward is what you need to implement things. It includes all your customers, it includes all your data. Obviously some extra time may be provided for retrospective data, so having consent around that. Also, when you have, we talk about digital journeys, but we are still in India. So everything is not digitized. There is there is a whole lot that you still walk up to your branches, to actually have your physical account opening forms involved, which subsequently get digitized. Obtaining consents there, and then having that into your systems. Be it about, as Yusuf rightly mentioned, there's a lot of there's still a lot of ambiguity in people's minds as to, people don't even know what is structured data, what is unstructured data. The dependence on your tech partner to help you navigate through that. As you have rightly mentioned, your notices, your consents requiring to be in all of your 22 Indian languages. So a lot of dependence in my understanding, and a lot of expectations from the tech partner like yourself. Over and above that, in the midst of all of this chaos, your breach management, your consents, reporting to the regulator, and having everything at the click of a button from a DPO standpoint, sitting in the midst of this chaos, and yet having this entire dashboarding before you to help you understand where the customer came in, gave his consent, revoked it, modified it, moving into your your organizations, talking to your own infra, which could be quite could be a legacy infrastructure, talking to your applications, databases. Something as simple as when a customer just has to withdraw his consent, how it goes, how a tech partner helps you, go to the nth level in terms of modifying, deleting. So the wish list from a tech partner will be a long one, although I agree with you, the responsibility will still be on the data fiduciary. But yeah, a long list of big long wish list for you, Ashok.
Yeah, it's a tremendous, and I'm shaking here with the kind of responsibility that I have, because honestly, if you're, as a partner, if we don't do our job, the fiduciary really suffers, right? And for that matter, that's probably all of us here, Supratim, Sindhu, as well as Debashri, all of us. A mistake means a mistake for the fiduciary, and that responsibility
Absolutely.
is a little scary at some level, to be honest, because also the clarity is like, it's not gone to that level of specificity in the act. So you're also making interpretations to a large extent on what does breach mean? What does parental consent mean? How do you get parental consent? And is that sufficiently good enough for telling the DPB that, hey, I did what I could. On that note, Sandhu, since I mentioned parental consent, we'll go right to you. Is the parental consent section references self-declaration by children. Now, and once he declares, that's when you establish the relationship between the parent and the child. Um, uh, and what do you foresee as challenges there, right? Like it's uh what if I'm a child, and but I say that I'm 18, an adult, then what happens? And maybe I want to have that question answered by Supratim as well, but first Sindhu from an implementation side, and Supratim from just like, because you're a lawyer and ambiguity is something you deal with on a daily basis.
Sure. So, Ashok, well-pointed question, and something that was going on in my mind too as I was reading that particular clause. So, verification of age and consent is the biggest challenge when it comes to parental consent. Authenticity of the age claims, self-declaration of parental consent. This gives a lot of room for manipulation. And
Yeah.
at this point of time, we do not have any technology solution which will help the data fiduciaries to validate whether the claim made by the child or by the parent is correct or not. So that's something that we are struggling with, and we don't know, and there is no clarity, right? So we are hoping that the government will come up with a very uniform consent management framework or something, or some guidelines which indicates how a data fiduciary should go about doing it. And I think one of the ways that I foresee government will come back is having a partnership with digital identity such as Aadhaar card to help establish the identity as well as the age claims. There has to be some mechanism through which we can validate the source of truth and understand whether the self-declaration in actually reality is the actual age or not. And awareness program, I think that's one of the most important thing. A widespread awareness program at national level is very, very key in order to understand how self-declaration and consent management is going to play a key role to ensure the risk is handled appropriately when it comes to self-declaration. Yeah.
So Pratham, you're smiling there.
I'll give you an interesting twist to this answer, Ashok. I think
We have talked about it many times in the last 2-3 months, I think. So Pratham, me and you is specific.
Because the DPDP Act came long time back, we forgot there is a list which is talking about the duties of an individual.
Yes.
And one of the things, a few things talked about there are not giving false, fake information, frivolous information, things like a lot of things, right?
Correct.
What if we turn it around and say that it was actually a mistake on the part of the individual?
Yeah.
And therefore, it is a liability on them, not on the data fiduciary.
Correct.
To have really checked. It is the individual or the data principal who is in the wrong here.
Yeah. Let me throw another question. I know we are kind of running out of time, but this is an interesting one, specifically on children's data and children and establishment of relationship between. Let's say the child does say that he's a minor, or there is an Aadhaar card, especially in the financial services side. Everybody's ID card is taken, so they will definitely know. In other sectors, maybe it's a little harder, but financial services, it's largely all ID cards are taken, and you know that, and because he has now given he has said he's not a minor, but he has given his Aadhaar card. So technically he has declared that he's a minor because the Aadhaar card has his date of birth. Now, establishing the parental relationship after that, because there is in Aadhaar, for example, today, there is, while the parent's name is mentioned, parent's ID number is not linked to the child's ID number. So absolute association is not possible other than a last name compare, if you may.
Yeah, so
Right.
I think, Ashok, if you read the rules, I think the way it is right now coming out is that the verification is that the person who said or has been mentioned as the parent, the person is an adult.
Yes.
The relationship establishment has not been very
clearly
specifically
defined.
called out that you have the duty to do that. Now, let's see how this gets interpreted. But right now, the black letter of the rules is giving that kind of a hint.
Excellent. No, that's exactly why I asked, because I don't think people need to be scared about it, because it's, as long as you're establishing, as soon as you have a child, you're establishing some relationship to an adult, and because you will be collecting their KYC details, you can associate, and hopefully with the last name being a match, you say, hey, this looks like a parent, is probably good enough for now, is how I read it. Hopefully that's all we can do.
Yeah, for guardianship, though, it's a little different, because they have kind of detailed out some more, but for parents, yes, you are right.
Correct. So Pratham, so let's get to the language part. And the rules require notices to be independently understandable. And one is language part of it, like how understandable some, like, and I'm going to ask a question which is slightly different from what we had covered in the yesterday's panel prep, but I'm going to ask a question which is around, okay, now lot of India is not cannot read. So these notices that we have, which is supposed to be in 22 languages, will not suffice for a large portion of our audience. Some of them might not even understand, understand the language on the phone. Voice might not be appropriate. it only tells me then that, simplification to some extent on notices, and how do you think about it? Because you've been working in this with and we have talked about this as well in the
Yeah.
past. So I want your
No,
thoughts.
I'll tell you. So
And then we'll go to the next question,
yeah,
which is
Justice Sri Krishna committee consultations were happening. I actually almost attended every single meet, and our entire team has attended in totality all the meets.
yeah,
So we were trying to understand the ground reality. Okay, and we realized that actually consent is quite a feeble ground, and one of the reason, of course, is that large illiterate population, people speaking varied languages. Even the most educated people are not reading what they are agreeing or accepting to. What could be the solutions? Several solutions actually, when especially I think if I remember correctly, Bangalore and Hyderabad, a lot of techies turned up and they gave brilliant solutions, like just in time kind of notification. When you go on the road, it says turn right, don't turn left. That kind of a pop-up for the relevant people, maybe as a video message if it's required, okay, or a very simply understandable mark there. All of that. So that I think as we evolve as an ecosystem, you'll see a lot of mature players maybe adopting it. And that could be consent given in real sense. But apart from that, the consent manager concept, like you were mentioning, we have a lot of faith that probably one day it will also evolve in a manner which will try and solve this problem.
yeah. So I think like, one of the things that I was thinking about is this is where I think while from a law perspective, GDPR and DPDP are similar, where it really differs is actually in what the grassroots reality is going to be, because the notices need to be understandable and multiple languages in multiple ways, and I think it cannot be done, in my opinion, cannot be done without technology intervention at all. Like, this is not something that can be like
No, I think Ashok, very simple. If you look at the act and the rules, the drift is that way. If you see
yeah,
clickable links everywhere when you are talking
correct,
about, say, grievance
correct,
redressal or anything that you see, when
correct.
they're further delineated as to the rights of the individual, I think the drift is very clear that technology has to come to assistance in order to implement this law.
Now, specifically around prospective and retrospective consent, I have always told a lot of my customers that worry about the prospective first. It's easy. Retrospective is going to take time. Retrospective involves data discovery. It involves, providing consent back to all your customers in the past. But if you start doing that, then you're and don't do the prospective, then actually you are creating more bad karma. So tomorrow you'll have to now deal with not 45 million customers for a bank like Axis, 50 million customers next year, right? Because you've not worried about the prospective as well. So how is I was hoping that at least on the law side, this is the one piece that they'll clarify, saying that, don't, this 18 months thing, for retrospective, you have slightly more time than
No,
prospective.
I think look at it differently, Ashok.
Yeah,
If you see the way the law is crafted, even in the DPDP Act level, it says that as far as the legacy data is concerned, if you have taken consent in the past, then you'll have to give notice. Okay, it's a one-way communication, and you can decide how you want to send that notice. You can cluster certain kind of customers and tell them that this is the kind of data, this is the reason why I have it, etc. The 4 or 5 things that have been already told to be mentioned. Going forward, of course, it has to be clear prior notice and then taking consent, etc. One thing which they should have probably clarified is that, my consent taken earlier may not have been the platinum standard that
correct,
you see, and therefore people can ask questions. What happens to that?
correct,
But just because we were aware of the background discussions when it was happening earlier, when the law was getting drafted, we saw what happened during GDPR implementation. Like, we got all tons of those emails that please give us consent so that we can keep sending you marketing mails, etc.
correct,
Now, if 2 lakh people were sent that kind of mails, not even 20 reverted back. So it was
correct,
catastrophic for businesses.
correct,
So when this drafting was taking place, a lot of discussion happened that we should not go down that route,
mm,
because it is important to protect individuals' personal data, but at the same time, it is important to have ease of doing business, protect innovation, entrepreneurship, all of that. I think that ethos still remain when you see how the minister is talking, etc.
correct.
Probably that balancing act will still be played.
Yeah. So at least from my perspective, at this point, I'm just going to become a panelist and give that bit of thing. What we have been advising some of our customers is that let's get clean about going forward, because that is easy. And it can be done relatively fast. And even the connectors to your MDMs, to your CRMs, and everything can be built relatively quickly within few months. That can be sorted. Retrospective, you don't know where your data is sitting at all. And honestly, these data discovery tools, however good they might be, they are not going to find everything, and you still are. It is a uh, process to be run over a period of time, and hopefully you'll get closer and closer to compliance. You're never going to be 100% compliant on knowing exactly, oh, this person's data is sitting with sub-processor number 5 under not DTDT's second sub-processor in Jumri Talaya who's delivering for DTDT. There is no way you will know that. And data discovery is not going to solve that. So at some level, I think we have to also be realistic as leaders of the organization that, guys, you're not going to, don't think of this as a magic pill that, oh, data discovery will solve everything. It will only improve, and it'll get better and better, but it's not going to solve. But for prospective, guess what? It can be as close to 100% as possible. And that's sort of how I kind of talk about it, but as a techie as well as a implementation partner.
Sorry, Ashok, I will have to drop off.
Okay.
My apologies. I have a
Okay.
hard stop now. Yep. See you all.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, we did get enough from you, Supratim. It's okay. I didn't get to make my standard joke on Supratim's this thing, but we'll do that later.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Last question, Debashri. How do you see consent manager framework applying to sensitive personal data, Aadhaar, PAN, or health records? Given examples like sharing bank statements between banks, etc. That largely is covered on the account aggregator side. But in this new world where account aggregator is not it's the consent given in account aggregator framework is actually around transfer of specific data between banks, and therefore does not have notice, for example, doesn't have deletion request in the manner that the DPDP Act requires. How do you see this applying to sensitive personal data as well as PII data, and how do you see this working?
So I believe that the consent manager is more of an enabler towards the data principle. So are you asking whether the
Yeah.
consent governance from a data fiduciary
Yeah,
standpoint?
I'm saying between the consent manager and the governance framework as well as the fiduciary, how do you think this lay of the land will end up, more from that perspective?
I think we will get more clarity. I do believe, and the government intention is that this act is more like a SEBI. If you see back then, it was a 20-page document, and now you look at SEBI how it is. There are so many guidelines, so many permutations, combinations. Even if you see the penalties, a 50 crore threshold on the penalties given for any compliance or any trigger that has not been taken into consideration. So they are as flexible. I think we'll have some guidelines around that, but what's the essence or the notes to the law or these discussions that have been happening on the consent management framework? We will have to find, and probably we'll have to take help from you to stitch the threads together and make it compliant with the present processes. We do have ISO certifications. Organizations are already compliant with GDPR. They are working towards ROPA. um, uh, we will have to find a solution in between to fix a consent manager framework and go about it. I think that is something that we'll have to do.
I think we'll close there because there are a lot of questions that have come up. Rebecca, maybe you can hold the question, you can sort of figure out which questions to answer. I think there are lots. So, and I know you've been reading as I see messages from you. Maybe Rebecca, you want to lead on that. But before we do that, final comments. Sindhu, Deepti, Yusuf, Debashri.
I think it's a welcoming change for the country, and we are looking forward to how this will pan out. And everybody's eager, also equally excited and overwhelmed. But I think it's a very good move for the country. Data is the in thing around the globe. They're more precious than the gold diamonds that we talk about usually. So yes, it's a need of the hour and it's a welcoming change for the country. Yeah. So
There's one telecom player who's made a lot of money from data. Not mention names, but anyway.
yeah, I agree.
Especially Yusuf and Lakshdeep.
My comments, and as I read the questions as well, there is a recurring question that's coming up on what do you do with the documents that are to be submitted with the statutory authorities, judicial authorities. So I just wanted to mention, maybe we missed this discussion, that whatever is statutory, whatever is required by the government, judicial is completely kept out of the DPDP compliances. You can submit statutory documentations. You need not seek a notice or a consent in such a case. So
Yeah, specifically on that one, it's very clear that the sectoral regulators, their rules and their policies supersede the DPDP Act. So, for example, RBI very clearly says that, for example, KYC data can be stored for 7 years and bank data can be stored for 7 years. DPDP, even if a person comes and says delete my data, you don't have to delete it because the RBI regulation supersedes the DPDP Act. So, sectoral regulation does supersede at
yes,
one level. So,
yes,
yeah,
the stricter law applies. Yes.
yeah. Rebecca, you wanna? Oh yeah, Deepti, Yusuf, final thoughts.
Yeah, I think.
No, I mean, as I mentioned, yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
Yusuf, go ahead.
So just 2 cents is that I think it's a time to exercise my right because it's my data, right?
Yes.
Being a resident, so I need to know where my data, what my data has been used for. So I have to be very clear about where my data is being used, who's processing it, for how long it's going to be processed, and then if I have the right to actually change or modify and know. I think it will. It's a great start from the India point of view. Although the world has already taken the journey, I think 10 years back uh, uh, after the advent of GDPR. So I think it's a good start, but we have to start slow. Be very strategic about from the fiduciary point of view, right? First, understand the data. What are the deep dive of requirement? And of course, having the accountability. Who's going to own? Who's going to bell the cat? That is still not clear. The DPO, the CISO, the CIO. I think shared responsibility. I understand it has been there for years, but there has to be clear accountability for who's going to do what.
Deepti, as a DPO yourself, it looks like the burden of
No,
proof.
so as I say, better late than never. Yeah, better late than never. I mean, it should have happened a very long time back, but yeah, better late than never. There'll be a lot of heartburn as we go through this implementation. Maybe the next 3 years would be grueling, but I think it's going to be well worth the effort, the time, and more importantly, at some point, even we all are customers, and it's well worth the effort, I believe.
Rebecca, you wanna just run through some of those questions?
Yes, let me do that. Also, just a disclaimer. So, for questions that we won't be able to pick up right now in the interest of time, we will answer everybody's questions and send them via email. So, need not worry if we cannot cover it in the session itself. Yes. A common question we get: what is the criteria for the determination of an entity as a significant data fiduciary? How do I decide whether my company is mandatorily required to have a DPO? Who would like to pick that up?
Like Supratim should have been here for this one.
I can pick it up. I'm a lawyer too. So so we have assessment parameters. See, the law is very, very clear on who will become a significant data fiduciary. We have standard assessment parameters, the volume of data that you have, the type of data that you have, whether it's a threat to the state's security, to a public order. Those are certain criterias by which you will be notified as a significant data fiduciary. Now, the government can nominate a sector and say that, okay, this financial sector or health sector becomes a significant data fiduciary, but we'll have to wait for that notification. But any more clarity than this from the act or the rules will not come. The assessment parameters, each company that we've been dealing with as PwC, they are very well aware of whether or not they have volumes of data principles, how essential that data is, whether they are behavioral tracking, monitoring, etc., etc. With straight jacket makes them a significant data fiduciary. So that's how the parameters work.
Okay. Somil would like to know, he would like for us to give some insights on international data transfer with DPDPA coming in. Ashok.
So I'll answer. I don't think there is right now.
Not yet.
It's not yet there in the rule, but I would look for it in the sectoral regulation. I think RBI is very clear about what data can be transferred and what cannot be. The DPDP Act, I think, is staying away from mentioning that, but I think the sectoral regulators will pick that up. Possibly even SEBI and SEBI actually has it as well, insurance as well.
Sakshi would like
But
to
anything
know.
else?
Yes, sorry. Sir.
Anybody else wants to comment on this?
The government will also come up with a blacklisted country list where they will prohibit transferring data to certain countries, possibly unfriendly countries, or where the government believes that the security is not up to the mark. So we'll also have to wait for that particular blacklisted country. But there is no localization restrictions that the law brings in this entire international data transfer landscape.
Sakshi would like to know more about the DPO under the Act. So she'd like to know who can be appointed as one, what is the process, what are the qualifications, roles of a DPO that's needed as such, and basically lay a little bit more clarity on the Act in reference to DPO.
Maybe Yusuf, Deepti, you guys, since you are the DPOs, so you might come from your perspective.
So Yusuf, you want to take that?
I think there's no specific requirement for being a DPO or a privacy officer. I think understanding the business is the most important aspect of this role, that he should understand the business, and of course must have a legal capabilities of understanding and translating and interpreting the requirement into the business requirement. I think that plays a major role in towards defining who's going to be the DPO or either as a CISO or a DPO. It all depends on the nature of the organization. Where do they want this role? Who this role to be led by within the organization?
Dipti, anything to add to that?
No, I'm with Yusuf, and I believe that a better understanding of the organization, and more than any qualification, understanding the organization, the business as such. I think that is an added that adds to that particular piece.
Got it. There are also overall questions on the implementation of the act, of the law in itself. So people want to understand timelines and when is the government expected to finalize this.
So at least from when I've heard the ministers talk about this, they said it's already an act. You better get compliant now. So I think the journey starts as of yesterday, in fact, but possibly will take after the rules are out. I think 18 months is what they have specified as a way to get fully compliant. But I think since the Competition Commission is referencing this in their fines, etc., it's here and now. I think it gets serious is my way of thinking about it. It's and I know the banks are probably a lot more compliant. I do know, by the way, Yusuf, we do work with Jubilant as well, and I know you guys take it very, very seriously as well. So some of the companies have already moved in this direction. Maybe Devashin, Sindhu, you guys can talk a little bit about some of your customers.
Yes, so when it comes to regulated industries, they are pretty much there because they do have exposure to some of these data privacy requirements as part of their international operations. However, the non-regulated industry like manufacturing sector, some of these sectors do not have any regulations at this point of time when it comes to data protection or data privacy. That's where we see as challenge. And let's not look at while the timeline mentioned at this point of time is between 18 months to 24. let's not get complacent saying it's 18 months, so maybe probably I can start it from next year. But it's a long overhaul. The journey has to start now for you to get complied by the end of the 18th month, right? There's a lot to do. A lot of time in our experience when we serve our clients, when we speak to the departmental head or the leadership team, they are in the impression that, we have these only 5 datas, which is coming within the ambit of data privacy. And when you really start interacting with the grassroots layer of the organization, then you realize the amount of data that they're handling, the kind of exchanges that's happening very freely with the external parties or stakeholders. It's humongous to get down to curtail that and ensure the right amount of controls are put in place. It's a very big journey. And of course, it's going to take a lot of lead time. Even I personally feel, for a large organization, even 18 months is too less. For organizations that do not come within the purview of regulatory framework, it's far more difficult for them to comply even within 18 months. So yeah, that's the message that I want to leave.
Debashri, there's a legal question also that would probably best answer it. It is, what is the impact of Rule 6 with respect to appropriate provisions in the contracts between
Sorry, we are
and its
chopping off
Sorry,
quite a bit.
not able to hear you, Rebecca.
I think there's a lot of background noise, Rebecca.
I don't think, okay, sorry.
Yeah, now it's better.
Oh, okay, I think that was coming from Devashri then. What I was saying was that, am I audible now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So they were asking, what is the impact of Rule 6F with respect to appropriate provisions in the contracts between a data fiduciary and a data processor for taking reasonable security safeguards? Does this mean that liability can no longer be limited for breach of indemnity with respect to data breach by IT companies or Big Four consultants?
Sure, I'll take that. Apologize for the background noise. We need, so Rule 6F specifically mentions a mandatory engagement of a data processing agreement between a data fiduciary and a data processor, which essentially means that you need to build up adequate representation, warranties, indemnities. The 4 questions that Supratim mentioned, question 1, 2, 3, 4, are something that would has to be built up as contractual clauses. You would have to ensure that the processor also has the same level of reasonable security and take a specific representation from them on data privacy. What we have identified since 2023 to 2025, while we were reviewing these contracts, we've seen that although they have business and confidential information data breach clauses mentioned, they do not have any privacy related clauses in the contract. uh, More so because the law does not give any right for a data fiduciary to go behind a data processor or reach out to the data protection board. You have to go ahead and go for rake the doors of High Court and Supreme Court and ask for a civil remedy from the data processor. So very important to build representation, warranties, indemnities, build up notifications, because if you have to inform a data protection board within 72 hours, your processor should be informing you within 24 hours, and that's how the chain will be built. So very very important. And no, you can limit the indemnity. You can have unlimited indemnity. It's a contractual arrangement that you need to seek and agree on.
So I would just like to come in on that one. Like, for example, one of the things that, at least a lot of companies think that, oh, you know what, I'll get completely compliant because the processor, I'll just pass unlimited liability to him. What you have to realize is a lot of the processors are much smaller than you. So if you cannot, and they probably, if your breach is, let's say 250 crores, the net worth of some of your processors, especially, let's say a bank which has a physical KYC partner, his net worth will be only 10. If he has a breach and you get fined 250, you cannot pass on the liability to him, even if you have it on the contract. It doesn't mean anything. So literally, you better get really, really good at managing the processor and auditing him and figuring out if they have the right processes, and legal contract is not sufficient to protect the liability, in my opinion.
Yes. Interestingly, you mentioned data processors because Juhi has also asked us to shed some light on the obligations of a data processor. The law seems to be silent on those as compared to the GDPR.
completely silent on, there are no penalties, no processes, no obligations on the data processors that the Indian law, and that is one of the distinction that we have between GDPR and other jurisdictions and the India law. Nothing on data
And
processors.
this is where I think some of the platforms globally do not give as much importance to processor management at all. So processor management becomes a very, very important part of the tool set that you will have to build, be it processes, technology, or training. And I think this nuance specifically, almost like is something that you have to look deeply at when you're assessing your technology partner as well. And Deepti has obviously chosen a great technology partner, but yeah.
We also have questions around. So, for the rest of the audience, we'll answer questions only for the next 5 minutes because our panelists are bound on time. But we will answer all your questions and share that to you all via email. So, worry not if any question goes unaddressed in this particular meeting. Yes. There also, Sutti has asked us on our thoughts on to see a ROPA-like implementation for internal transparency of data within the company.
Should I take that?
Yeah.
Okay, so ROPA implementation has been subsumed. They've not called it out, but data protection impact assessment, they've left it for the organizations to decide. See, the Indian landscape is so diverse that they will not give you threadbare granular norms because nothing is a straight jacket fit for all the organizations. So, in a data protection impact assessment, certain organizations have leveraged on the ROPA requirements and have taken that. Otherwise, a PII, a data discovery, or a ROPA, they've left it up to you to build up and see what suits your organization. That's how the law has been laid.
And in addition to what Debashri is saying, I agree with that. See, ROPA is a very good process to have in an organization. You get a complete insight on what kind of data is being dealt by each of the operations held in the company, right? Which otherwise you will not know. So I don't think every aspect of what we should do will be articulated in the legal framework or the rule set. Some of these things are good habits to have and good processes to have, and we should continue to do so. It will bring a great deal of clarity in how you need to address the Data Protection Act when you have ROPA kind of processes in place in the organization. So doing away ROPA is something I wouldn't advise, and that's a good practice to continue to keep.
One of the things I think some of these processes itself, just implement them beforehand. Don't have to wait for for the future, like baat karenge. These are things which will take some amount of time, but as good practice can be started very, very quickly.
Absolutely. I agree. And that should be your first starting point. So that's how you will get to know what kind of data is being handled by your organization, which otherwise you will never know. It's all based on assumptions.
Correct.
Okay, and the last question right now is that how do you see organizations balancing compliance with multiple data privacy laws like GDPR, CRP, and India's DPDP Act, particularly when operating across jurisdictions with conflicting requirements?
Well, I'll answer that question. I think what is needed in such a scenario is that you need to create a unified compliance framework. Many of the requirements would overlap, so I think you don't need to actually do it over and over again. And then any addendums or any additional requirement, you can do it separately. So I think in a multiple compliance framework, UCF is something which have to be clear. Otherwise, you will end up meeting requirement for each and every individual regulation. It would be very costly to actually, or being effort would be needed in order to do so. So I think that's the only way that you have to do it.
Fortunately, India doesn't even have localization requirement in the DPDP Act. So if your data, other than the sectoral part, which is very specific for the kind of data you can, because if it was localization was a requirement, then it would be a lot more of a pain, because not only are you supposed to localize in Europe, in US, and then that would have been painful. But fortunately, we don't have that.
I think the consent is only which is unique about India, that you need to have a different consent manager.
Correct.
I think rest of the frameworks or the regulation doesn't mandate to have a separate consent. You can develop it in-house, or you can
But
adopt a
even the
platform.
consent manager is not a mandatory requirement.
It's not a mandatory requirement as well.
You can use a consent manager if you want
Yeah.
to. But from a company perspective, you have to provide a right kind of notice. It has to be specific. There has to be ability for revocation, for forget, for review. And those the consent manager is not going to solve anyway. Yeah.
Okay, great. I think, yes, I just want to thank everybody from the panel from joining and from the audience. We have over 120 people that have stuck around post time. So thank you so much for sticking around. For clarification to the audience, we will also be sharing a webinar summary note with you, the recording and answers to all your questions. So anybody whose questions have gone unaddressed, we will provide a summary for it.
Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
remember, we can solve a lot of these problems for you as IDfy with our product called Privy, which is a suite of about 4 products which solves most of the questions we have answered here today.
Okay.
Except for the training stuff.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.